Hello everyone, and welcome to this new series called 66 Books. I'm so excited to be launching this new installment. I think it's so important that when we read scripture, we're really able to actively apply it to our own lives. I know we hear it a lot in the nation. Our priests, our elders talk about it a lot. You need to be able to read the Bible and read the scripture and see yourself in it and know that these were real people dealing with real problems, and that we can use their solutions or their journeys or lessons learned from those stories, apply it to our own lives and better ourselves. And so with each episode of 66 books, the goal is to examine a story or even a quick little excerpt from one of the books of the Bible and really just discuss what lessons can be learned from that, what strategies our forefathers used in their lives that we can actively apply to our own to better ourselves and further develop our life stories. And so with that, we'll go ahead and do a deep dive in today's episode, which is titled Genesis and Life in Your 20s. So today's topic was birthed out of a phenomenon I was seeing on social media. I don't know what my algorithm was trying to tell me or push towards me, but I kept seeing these videos titled Wasting Your 20s, or I wasted my 20s so that you don't have to. And so I clicked on them, and basically these videos were like influencers, content creators, just sharing some of the mistakes that they had made in their early adulthood life, and basically just giving tips and tricks on how not to make the same mistakes that they did and how to really approach your early adulthood stage with focus, right, on building your future legacy. And while I think a lot of those tips and tricks were so beneficial as someone that is in their early 20s, I do want to push against this idea that your 20s can be considered wasted as a result of the mistakes that you make. I would argue that your 20s are a time to make mistakes, to figure out what your purpose is in life and how you want to go about pursuing your passions in your personal life, your career life, with Israel, etc. And I think naturally when you are focused on creating and building a legacy, and when you are leaving home the first time or given an opportunity to be on your own for the first time, it really is a test. And with every test comes trials and tribulations. And sometimes you pass those tests and sometimes you fail, but it's all about how you bounce back afterwards and how you respond to those failures. So today, I want to take time to discuss life in your 20s because it is a difficult time. It's filled with so many different things that I'm still learning about. But I also want to parallel it to the story of Abram because I think it's perfect. In the beginning of Abram's journey, he's told by the God of Israel to leave his family, to leave the land, to leave everything that he's known and trust the God of Israel and trust that he will be blessed. And through that story, we see all the trials and tribulations that Abram goes through. We see him start to build his legacy as far as the wealth he's able to amass. We see the way in which even his spirituality helps him conquer some of those challenges that he endures. And I love this story because it really highlights the fact that even though this video is titled Genesis and Life in Your 20s, these tips and tricks can be applied to anyone. If you're at any stage of your life where you are starting over or are starting on a path that you're unsure about and you don't really know where you're going or you're trying to discover yourself, this is the video for you. This is the story for you to read because as we're going to see, Abram began his journey at, I want to say it was 75, we're going to read here today. So this can be applied to anyone. But I'm excited to dig in. So let's go ahead and start with scripture and have a really nice discussion. We're going to start at the very beginning of Abram's story at Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 to 4. And it reads, Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed, as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. So there are a few things that stand out to me from this scripture. We'll start with the first verse. I keep thinking again, because we have to put ourselves in our forefathers' shoes. Like, if someone told me today, if I got a message today that I would have to leave home, leave my country, everything I've known to go on this journey, I would be having a difficult time, okay? Especially because I'm someone that does not like uncertainty. Like, y'all, I remember when I was younger and I would have like speaking engagement, public speaking engagements, whatever, I would get really nervous if I didn't know what the place I was going to be performing at looked like. And so as I got older, I would look up the place that I was going to be at just so I knew what to expect on this one thing, and it would help calm my nerves. So, I can't imagine what was going through Abram's head when he heard this. But what I love about this scripture is when the God of Israel tells him, I'm going to have your back. I will bless them that bless thee, curse thee that curse thee, and in thee all families of the earth should be blessed. And for me, what this point or this part of Abram's journey reminds me is to embrace the unknown and trust the God of Israel. The unknown is so hard. I think as humans, we like the idea that we have control over our lives, that we, know the person we're going to marry, know the career we're going to have, that we can plan out our lives and it will go accordingly. But as those of us who have lived this life and who are experiencing it now, we're not in control. We're not in control at all. I always say the one thing that you can control is how you respond to the things that are thrown back at you. But I think it's such a real thing to experience fear because of the unknown. Just to apply things to our lives, right? Because we talked about the importance of actively applying the scripture to our own lives. For me, when I read this story, I think about my journey going off to college, which I think a lot of us have experienced or will experience in our early adulthood life. You're leaving home. You no longer are accountable to your parents, right? Typically, if you're on campus or whatever, every night you don't have to come home to your parents and do chores and speak to them and talk to them. They can have no clue what you're up to, right? And so your spirituality is dependent on you, whether or not you're able to maintain and upkeep your grades, like everything is now placed upon you. And there's this new responsibility as you start new. You start this new environment, new friends. You're leaving everything you've known to venture off into new things. And what I think is so important in order to be successful when you go into these new environments, and maybe you're intimidated by the unknowingness or the uncertainty, is to really examine your value systems and formulate your non-negotiables. I know this sounds a little intense and crazy. You're like, I'm ready to go to college, right? I'm ready to have fun, party. Like, this is my new stage in life, whether it's even moving out of your home. Like, I'm ready to have fun. But I say this because when I was a resident advisor at the university that I was at, they used to have us do these like little exercises with our residents that would come in, because I worked with first year, so it was their first time being on campus away from home. That's the division that I worked under as, I want to say, a junior and a senior. They would have us do these exercises that when I was a first year, I thought, this is so lame, this is so boring, like I'm ready to get to know people. But it basically had you outline what were your top 5 values, and then it made you downsize that to what are your top 3 values, and to discuss them and share them with your homemates. And looking back on that exercise, I think that is so, so important, because in my conversations with some of the residents that I had, college was so hard because a lot of people felt like this was the first time in which they really had to find themselves. They had to work on making new friends and seeing, what does my social standing look like? what is going to fulfill me? And most importantly, the number one thing that we would always stress during these exercises is what is going to make me feel like I belong. Because so much of our human experiences is feeling like we belong to something bigger in a community. And when you are on your own and starting over and starting anew, it is so important to not let that sense of wanting to belong deter you from this path of Israel, and instead using that sense of a belonging to find your higher purpose in what is going to fulfill you. And so when I read Genesis 12, the scripture, verse 3 resonates with me so much, because it's like, you're starting anew, you're gonna go off and build this legacy, this vision that I have for you, but I got your back. If anything comes up against you, they're going to be stricken down. And if anyone blesses you, they will be blessed in return. It is a true father and child relationship with the God of Israel. And so, my first tip for navigating life in your 20s is to examine your value systems, formulate your non-negotiables. It is the first time where you are alone and you are able to sit and think about how you were raised, what your upbringing was, what your family's value systems are, your friends, and decide what you want to keep with you, what you want to take, and what you want to grow in and develop and formulate new. And it's a beautiful time of exploration. So much can come out of it, but it's also a very vulnerable time as well. Another thing that I want to point out from this expert as well is I think it's really, really important. We talk about routines a lot as something that I've been learning as early 20s. You think I would have it down by now at this age, but I say routines because routines for me really mean discipline, right? When I think about routines, I think about, something simple as every night I go to bed at 8 p.m. so I can get my full 8-10 hours of sleep so that I'm ready and productive at work the next day. Or I have a skincare routine. I do this layered skincare routine so that my skin is fresh, it's glowing, because that's important to me to keep. And I think it's also really important to develop spiritual routines as well. And as we continue to read today and see Abram's story, you can definitely see that he was connected to the God of Israel throughout, and that spirituality, he was wise enough to use his spirituality to help him in those instances where he needed it, but to also give thanks or to get guidance as well. And so it's really important as you are on your own to develop spiritual routines. I remember when I first went off to college, spiritual routines were really hard for me to continue and to develop. And I say this because, as you know, when you pray, you want it to be private, but I had a roommate, right? I had a roommate with me during college. Was a great roommate, but it kind of disrupted things, because if my roommate was in the room, guys, it was such a small room, by the way, it was so small, but if my roommate was in the room, I didn't feel comfortable enough to be praying there, because she was right next to me across from it. So I had to figure out her schedule to know when to pray, and sometimes make adjustments okay, I can't pray today, but maybe I can listen to Israelite music before I leave or walk out the door, or sing one of our songs, or say the pledge in my head to get through. But it's just so important that you develop those spiritual routines and figure out how you can keep them when you go on this new journey and path that you're taking, so that it can keep you strong, so that you can identify when there are things that could make you vulnerable in terms of your spirituality, and what you can do to prevent yourself from falling off of this path of truth, because we know it's not an easy path to follow. There are so many trials and tribulations and temptations, but creating those spiritual routines really help. And the last thing I want to note about this passage as well, before we move on to the next, is it's also important with those spiritual routines to have check-ins as well, to know when you're falling off. Just being very vulnerable here, I know that there were times during my college career when I was off alone where I was sort of falling off of my spiritual routines, and maybe I wasn't the strongest. And that was something as simple as, okay, maybe I had a routine of praying every day before I go off or praying every day to start my day and then to end the day, just as a constant thing. And then all of a sudden a month goes by because of finals and it's been so busy, and I realized I haven't been connected spiritually at all, right? I remember when I went off to college, I would feel really disconnected because the pandemic hadn't hit yet. So I was missing a lot of Friday nights and Saturday messages that would happen live because I was too far out to go. I couldn't get there. I couldn't drive at the time either. There was a huge disconnect there because I wasn't able to get that spiritual knowledge and food twice plus a week like I was used to, right? But I think the important thing was being able to recognize when that happens. My mom knows this, and she always kind of like cringes when I say it, but I'll tell her, like, yeah, I'm not feeling connected spiritually right now. I need to do something. Like, we can be in the car driving to go shop, and I'll just mention it, like, I haven't been feeling connected spiritually. I really need to get on it. And it's so important to be aware of that so that you can take the necessary steps to correct it or get advice on how to maneuver around it, which is why I usually tell my mom so that she can give me advice on how I can keep the fire blazing. Because one thing that we must remember is the Spirit is moving. So the Spirit can stay with you, but it can also leave. And so your question as an Israelite every day really has to be, how can I continue to cultivate the Spirit so that it's comfortable residing with me, in me, so that I can stay on this path of truth? And so whenever I would experience those moments, it might be something as simple as, okay, the new moon and Sabbath is coming up. Let me do a prayer program to get really connected with the God of Israel. Set a time and pray and pray. And let me actually pick a psalm too that I'll reflect on this whole month of new moon, so I can just keep it at and feel connected. And those are the ways that you can really ensure that your time, as you are exploring and trying to figure out where you're going and what you're trying to do in your 20s, that you have that spiritual assistance with you, and that you are at least being guided on the right path as you go through this time of discovery. We're going to go ahead and transition into our next scripture for today, Genesis chapter 13. We're going to read verse 1 to 9, and it reads, "And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai, unto the place of the altar which he had make there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdmen of Abram's cattle and the herdmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelt then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we be brethren. Is it not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right, or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left." Once again, there are a few things that I really love about this scripture. The first thing that stood out to me is, so this scripture takes place after Abram went with his wife Sarai to Egypt, and his wife was an extremely beautiful woman, and he had to kind of like finesse things and lie to protect himself and say that she was his sister. The God of Israel starts plaguing the house of Pharaoh, and things start churning, and Pharaoh's like finds out that it was not Abram's sister but his wife, and he's like, "Get thee out, go." And with that, Abram's able to leave with all of his wealth. As we read, he leaves with flocks and herds and silver and gold. And so he's able to accomplish and overcome that trial and tribulation with the God of Israel's wisdom. And the first thing that he does that we see is he goes to the altar and he calls upon the God of Israel. I think this is so beautiful in highlighting the importance of gratitude in any part of our life journey. You know, we always have to remember that with the God of Israel, it truly is building a relationship. You know, praying to him and connecting with him, talking to him, letting him know what our desires are is so important, but also being extremely grateful of the ways in which he blesses us, protects us, and guides us are so important. Again, we got to put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we are reading, and even just think about what a father's relationship is like with his child, or anyone for that matter. When you give someone something and they show their appreciation and their gratitude, that also makes you feel good. And you're like, okay, like, I'm gonna keep giving this person gifts whenever the celebratory time comes, or when I want to give them gifts, because they're so grateful, versus when you give someone a gift and they don't really say anything, or they're unappreciative, or just keep going about their day. It makes you feel different. So it's important to just remember that. Remember the ways in which our God is a father to us, and to be grateful when he allows us to go through these challenges and accomplish things. You know, that is such an integral part of Israelite culture in general. You know, we have celebrations and feasts. One of the things that we do, you know, our prosperity feast. That's so important, to thank the God of Israel for the new blessings that he gives us in our lives. And even, you know, I like to think of tithes as a way to show forth thanks. It's an action of gratitude. Like, it's a awareness that the God of Israel blessed me with this job. So how could I not return the blessing to help build forth this nation, his baby, what he wants to see grow and develop and to be great. And so throughout our life journeys, think of ways, even get creative. We always talk about Israel's a creative people. The Jacobite community is a creative community. We're creative people. So think about ways that you can get creative in showing your gratitude for when the God of Israel does answer your prayers, whether that's, you know, a prosperity feast because you had excellent grades. It was a hard academic year, but you came out on top, right? Or even, you know, I want to write a song for the God of Israel to offer this offering of thanks. Or let me think of, you know, something, a project that the nation is working on that I can offer up my services as a way of gratitude and thanks. And of course, prayer, just simply praying. One of my favorite things to do is I always make a point, right, to pray at least once a day. But I love praying in the morning and then in the evening, because I am able to see the ways in which the God of Israel has answered my prayers day to day, even for small stuff. Like, God of Israel, this test is coming up. I'm not ready. Help me to know the answers. I tried to study, help me. And then all of a sudden, the technology for the quizzes start acting up. And we don't have to take the test, and I have an extra day to study. Like, small things like that, or even big things, right? You're able to see it day to day. And when you do that, you're filled with so much gratitude, and you see the way he moves through your life, which is so important. Another thing I think is so important to highlight from this scripture is the fact that at this point, Abram had to part ways or kind of separate from Lot at this time. And I truly believe a lot of us can relate to this moment, and where you're at a point in your life where you're starting something anew and you lose friends or people in your life in the process. I know I experienced that in middle school. I know that's taking it a few ways back when this is a life in your 20s conversation, but I'm going to connect it. But I remember when I transitioned into middle school, I had, you know, a couple of best friends, people that I was really close to, and one girl in particular I was super close to. And middle school is a really difficult time for me. I don't know, maybe it's the puberty, and I just think middle school kids can tend to be really mean, but it was a really hard time for me. I kind of really went into my shell. I didn't speak a lot. I was at a place where my self-confidence even was at a low, and I don't know if my friend was sensing that, but there was definitely a shift taking place. And I'll never forget, you know, we weren't even in the same classes at the time, and I would see her passing by and say hi, but that was it. And I remember there was one instance in the bathroom where I saw her and she was like, hey. And I was like, hey. And she was like, what happened? I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, you're just different. And I remember I shrugged my shoulders and like, I don't know. And that was the last time we ever really spoke to each other. And my middle school journey was a tough one. I didn't have strong friends for at least the first 2 years of my middle school journey, like best friends like I did in the past. And because of that journey, it forced me to become very comfortable with being alone. Even though I was going through a confidence thing and learning how to be more confident, which I was eventually able to get to and be more proud of myself, I spent a lot of time alone as a middle school kid. I might have had friends there or there, but sometimes I would, walk to places alone or be the only one standing. I just had to get very comfortable with being alone. And when I look back on that, I can see the blessing in it, because I know once I got to college and even being an RA, a big thing that a lot of young people struggle with is feeling lonely. It's feeling like they don't have the best friends that they envision, or that they're connected to people in the way that they are, that they've lost friends that they used to be so tight with and they no longer have it, and they feel lonely because of that. And I think it's so important, especially being an Israelite, right? We're already so different from others, and it's already such a separation. That's highlighted so much in our history, right? Is we're separate from other people. God of Israel wants us separate. It's very important for you to be able to be comfortable with being alone. I don't mean be, a hermit and never go out and speak to people. Like, at least be self-aware to know when you need to work on your social skills and social anxiety, which I know that was a part of my journey and getting better there. But really be comfortable being alone, because this journey is a hard one. I know a lot of young people, you're the only ones in your universities, in your schools, in your colleges, and in a world where spirituality is so heavy in terms of spirituality that deters and takes away from your light. You have to be so comfortable and confident in being alone and speaking up for yourself. Up until this point, Abram was on this journey with Lot, but God of Israel wasn't telling Lot at this time, God of Israel wasn't talking to both Abram and Lot and saying, I'm going to build a legacy within you. Israel is going to be with you. I'm going to curse those that curse thee and bless those that bless thee. He wasn't telling both of them. At the beginning, we read it was to Abram, right? And so it's so important to be aware of that, to be aware that in order for you to achieve some of your blessings and even the ideal life that you envision, some people are not going to be a part of that journey. And you have to be okay with letting some of those people go and showing to the God of Israel that you trust him, that you understand not everyone is always going to be on your path, but that God of Israel will bless you with something bigger, that there's a lesson to be learned in this journey, that it's only going to make you stronger, and things are going to be okay, more than okay. You're going to be blessed by the end of this. So I love reading this scripture. It's something I feel like I didn't necessarily take note of before, was that parting of ways, right, that Abram and Lot had to do. And we're going to later see how they are able to reunite a little bit later on or soon. But it's just so important to get comfortable with being alone. You're not lonely, you're alone. So take that time to invest in yourself, to build in yourself, and figure out the things that you like, that you don't like, the types of friends that you do eventually want to be added on into your life, and go about that and figure out how to navigate that, but still be comfortable with being with yourself. Another thing I want to briefly point out before we move to the next scripture is that similarly, when we look at Lot and Abram, it's important to recognize that your journey is different from others. It is so hard in this age of social media, where you can get just like a whole inside view of people's lives and their accomplishments and their highlight reels, as we like to say, to sometimes have feelings of envy and jealousy, or like, ugh, like they're achieving so much at this age. Why am I not there? God of Israel, I'm a chosen one. Why am I not doing great things? But it's so important to know that everyone has their own journey, and that you really have to learn to channel that envy either into inspiration, mentorship, or just focus on your own path. And what I mean by that is if you see someone, we talk about this in the nation a lot, if you see someone in Israel that's achieving and doing big things, or even outside of Israel, instead of letting that envy consume you and be greeting and speaking against the God of Israel, like, God of Israel, why? Like, how could you? Take that time to assess what they're doing. Figure out what are their strategies. Okay, they're achieving this. What are their strategies? How do they come about that? How can I use those same strategies and my spirituality to accomplish what I want to accomplish? Or to just simply recognize, as I said before, that we each have our own paths and our own journeys. Again, something was special about Abram to be turned into Abraham, and Lot was not a part of that special thing. It wasn't for him. He was blessed because he was attached to Abram, as all people that blessed Israelites are. They end up being blessed, right? But this was not his journey and his path. And so you have to learn how to be comfortable in that. Either tap that person and ask them for mentorship, ask them to show the way, or know that you're going to find your way and use that as inspiration to chase after your goals more. But know that timing is everything. Timing is so important in this stage of your life, because some of us in our 20s need time to develop more emotionally. Some of us need time to build a strong financial foundation for us to move forward in the ways that we need to. Some of us need to take time to really just sit and work on our spirituality more and put ourselves into the nation and figure out the purpose for us in this nation, and then maybe dabble into other things. And so the number one tip I say to use when navigating those times of separation from other people is to lean on the God of Israel by prayer, asking the God of Israel to guide you. God of Israel, I'm going through a hard time. Can you guide me? Show me the way to get to where I need to, or show me what you envision for my purpose. And be on the lookout for those signs that you will get from him, from those messages that come from, whether your brethren are talking to you or a psalm keeps coming up repeatedly for you. Use your spirituality to get direction and guidance on what you should be exploring or discovering or moving towards in this time of your journey.
And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboam, and the king of Bela, the same as Zor, and they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim, with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arach, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their victuals, and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan.
So I wanted to share this scripture as a reminder that, Abram's journey to Abraham and his life journey since leaving was in no way easy. He experienced a lot of challenges, and this being one of it, right? You have these kings that are, going at war, and then Lot is captured, his family, right? His kindred, and now he has to go to war to save him. And as we just mentioned, this pathway of truth is not easy. A lot of times it can be a path in which you travel alone. I don't want to say lonely. I'm going to say alone because you always have the God of Israel there. You're never truly lonely. But I say that to say, in this stage of your life, it's best to sort of expect the challenges and the trials and tribulations to come, so that way that you can be prepared for when they do. What I love about the story, and I'm not going to read the rest of it, but at the end of it, Abram is able to get Lot, and the king of Sodom, I believe, approaches him, and he's like trying to show him gratitude, and basically is doing negotiations like, okay, you can take this as a sign of appreciation, but not this. And you know what? Abram is so integral. And the biggest thing is, like, he really knows the God of Israel, because he denies taking any of the goods from the king of Sodom, because he's like, lest you say that you made me rich and not my God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. I think that's so important, in that it's always important to stay prepared, stay ready. I think the quote is, get ready, or stay ready so that you don't have to get ready. So when I talked about spiritual routines earlier, that is a way that you can stay ready for when those challenges arrive in your journey navigating your 20s, when, you go through stages where you may, lose people in your life that were important to you, or you have those moments of self-doubt. That's when you can look at these moments of, Abram's journey and see the way in which the God of Israel delivered every time. And again, I also want to point out the integrity, right? When Abram was like, no, I'm not going to take that because you're going to give credit for the thing that is my God. He has a value system there, right? He values the God of Israel as his God, and he trusts him, and he's seen the way the God of Israel has covered him all throughout his life's journey. And because of that, when he's in these situations, right, we're like, come on guys, it's a lot of wealth. That's a lot of wealth. A king is offering to give you goods. That's huge. But when you're in those situations where there may be a conflict of interest, you may say, to your spirituality and what will make the God of Israel happy, that's when you can go back to your value systems, to take a moment and reflect and be like, wait, does this align to what I'm about, to what my God is about, and to make the right choices and decisions accordingly as well.
All right, next I'm going to get into my last scripture of the day. And behold, the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, This shall not be thine heir, but he that shall come forth out of thine own bowels shall be thine heir. And he brought him forth abroad and said, Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. And he said unto him, I am the Lord that brought thee out of the Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit it.
I really love this scripture because I think it highlights something that we all experience in our life journey, which is self-doubt. If you read the beginning of the story, you'll see that, God of Israel is telling Abram over and over, I'm going to make a generation out of you. I'm going to bless you and your seed. And Abram's like, okay, God of Israel, like, I'm up there in age, okay? I'm childless. Like, what do you mean? And the God of Israel takes him and sees, can you number the stars? That will be your seed. That will be your heir. And what I love about it is it reads, and Abram believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him for righteousness. We say this a lot in the nation, lean not to your own understanding. And some things you're not sure how it's going to work out. You don't understand how the path is going to lead you to what your purpose is or you are destined for. And in those moments, it's so important to surrender to the God of Israel and to trust him, to show him that you trust him and you believe in the path so that you can find fulfillment in what you are trying to do. And so from this excerpt, I really, again, just want to highlight the point of seeking out that guidance from the God of Israel, asking him to guide you in your journey, not leaning to your understanding all the time, and learning to give it your all And after you've done everything you can physically and spiritually do to achieve what you were trying to achieve, just trust that if it is in the God of Israel's will, that it will happen. So as we wrap up today's episode, there are a few big takeaways that I just want to cement and share before we close out today. Overall, I want those of you that are going through this trying time in your early 20s to remember that this is a time in your life where you are building upon the foundation that was established in your younger years, but you are in no way expected to finish that build. When we read about the story from Abram to Abraham, and I implore you to just take time to read the full entire story on your own time as well. Abram's journey that we started reading today starts at 75, and his name is changed at the age of 99. That's over 20 years. That's over 20 years. And so a point that, my so wise priesthood and elders and aunties and uncles always make is to remember the timeline that occurs when you're reading this scripture, that not everything is happening in a day. Some of these things are taking years, and as we see with Abram's journey to Abraham, decades even. So don't create timelines to put a huge pressure on yourself. I even like to say, journeys are constantly evolving. Even when you do reach your goals according to a certain timeline, there's always so what's the next step? What's the progression? This is a constant thing throughout your life, a journey where you are trying to figure out what goals you want to achieve, where your place is in the nation, and really how can you build your legacy, and what do you want your legacy to look like? And so with this, the overarching tips and things I want you to hold on from today's episode is that, again, expect trials and tribulations through this journey and embrace those challenges. Fail early and fail often. As I mentioned, it's very important to just embrace failing, because from that you learn what is working, what is not, and able to pivot so that you can conquer your next goals and your next challenges with more ease. My next tip is to stop comparing your journey from others and turn that envy into mentorship. So throughout this journey, it's very natural to look and see where other people are on their paths, whether they're getting new jobs or figuring out what their greatest purpose in life is or what they want their legacy to be in. And it can breed forth insecurity. But it's so important to remember, one, a huge part about being an Israelite is being alone and getting comfortable on your own path. But also remember, we all have our own path and our own journey to follow. So stay focused on yours and use others as inspiration, motivation, or mentorship to help you get to where you need to get. Another trick is to remember to examine your value system and establish some non-negotiables. As those trials and tribulations come up, they're going to test you. They're going to test your integrity. And it's much easier to make the right decision for yourself when you know what your values are and can make conscious and active decisions based off of your value system. My next thing is to remember that sometimes your greatest fears will come true, but you can use that as an opportunity to grow stronger, to learn more about yourself and what you need to improve upon in order to achieve your goals with more strength. And the last thing, and I would argue the most important thing to take away from this episode, is to take this time to grow closer to God. You are so vulnerable at the age that you are. Honestly, any stage can be really vulnerable, but I think your 20s can be super vulnerable because, again, you're on your own. You're trying to find your footing in this world. And so with that, there are a lot of temptations that we talked about. So it's so important to make sure that you establish those spiritual routines like we talked about, to make sure you are always in tune with the God of Israel, always in alignment, and that the Spirit of truth is comfortable residing with you, because that is our strength. When you need help on this pathway to achieve your goals, to figure out what you want to do, it's going to come through the God of Israel. The answer is the God of Israel. So lean onto him. Pray. Do Bible study. Talk and commune with your brethren and grow stronger. And I promise you, you will see a direct correlation in your life in terms of your closeness to the God of Israel and how you're able to progress and chase after your life goals in this time and journey. So with that, I want to thank you all for tuning in to the first episode of this new series. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share this video with anyone that you think would benefit from the message that was shared here today. I so appreciate everyone that has tuned in. Let me know your thoughts, what other topics, books of the Bibles you want me to explore next. And also don't forget to tune in to our Friday night messages that occur at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and our 2 p.m. Eastern Saturday messages. And with that, I bid you peace.